I think the biggest mistake that we make is actually not caring too much about what other people think. It's actually that we care too much about what we think. Let me explain. Welcome to the Bold Perspectives podcast. I'm your host, Archie Del Rey, and this episode is a deep dive on decisions and specifically conscious versus subconscious decisions. One of my favorite jokes or joke formats from John Oliver, the host of Last Week Tonight, is when something really bad happens, then he says something like, and then now you are questioning all the decisions that you've ever done in your life that led you to be in this specific situation, which I think is quite funny, but is also kind of the most spiritual thing that he probably ever said, because this is what life is, right? It's a series of decisions that you kind of stack on top of each other that lead you to where you are right now, and your future decisions will continue to lead you where you're going to go. And of course, there is a lot of debates around this. We could go into philosophical questions like, is there free will, or is this life deterministic? Is there fate or something like that? And to me, unfortunately, these discussions kind of never end in any practical way. And I care a lot about practical value. So to me, what I figured out is that decisions kind of fall into different categories or happen in different domains, let's say. So for example, when I say I decide to call the dentist to make an appointment, I would argue that for most people, not for everybody, but for most people, this would be something that is mainly in the domain of the conscious, meaning that there is not much happening in my subconscious that would influence that decision, whether I actually follow up on it or not. Like what I mean by that is when I think, okay, I should call the dentist and make an appointment, I will probably do it and not think or feel much about it. On the other hand, for many people in today's world, when the question is, okay, I think I should call my mother or my grandfather or call my boss and talk about this difficult thing, have that uncomfortable situation about something that I've been kind of feeling for a long time, and then I postponed it, and now it got really difficult to even address because it has already been kind of cooking for so long in me. And you see where this is going. Like, this is on the surface level, it's both me, like my consciousness. When I say me, like I, the conscious part of my psyche, right? I decide I think I should call the dentist, or I think I should call my grandmother. But these do not feel the same, right? Why do these decisions do not feel the same? Even though on the conscious level, this is about calling a person and having a conversation. So this has to do with what I would call domains, like what does it touch inside of me? And not just the conscious part, not just that part of me that wants to have the call right now, but all these parts of me that attach further meaning and further emotions and further experiences and power struggles and future outcomes and all kinds of things that are attached to that one decision. So this creates a multiverse, like a large diversity of where decisions can kind of fall into when it comes to our conscious and subconscious psyche. So what are the implications of this? So let me first take a little detour into the free will question, because there has been a study quite a while ago where people were presented with decisions and all kinds of different things were measured on their body. There were like electrodes to measure like brain waves, and I think also like electrodes on the heart to to kind of see different physiological reactions and also record the exact time when somebody would take a decision. Like they were, I don't remember the exact setting, but it was something like people were presented with pictures, I think, and they had to decide like which picture they take and stuff like that. So anyway, it was about decisions, and it was about figuring out, is there such a thing as free will or not? And then there was this study where they basically measured that the decision is made physiologically before the consciousness, like before the brain picks a specific picture on the screen. So what does that mean? Well, what they made it mean is that free will does not exist. This is predetermined. You think you take the conscious decision, but the electrodes and all the measurement system shows that the decision was made before you thought that. Hence, free will does not exist. To me, this whole experiment and the whole interpretation, all the studies about this, is a symptom of how we actually misunderstand the concept of free will, and especially like the mechanics of free will, because we are kind of conditioned to think that we are our brains, and that when I say I always speak about that conscious part of me. Maybe you are familiar with the Iceberg model of the psyche, which basically says that the conscious mind is like the tip of the iceberg. It's the 1% of who we are. And then there's the 99%, the whole bulk, massive thing of thoughts, beliefs, feelings, experiences, memories, all the stuff that is in the subconscious that we do not talk about when we say I, but that have actually much more influence on everything that we do, like on our behavior and especially on our decisions. So what does that mean? That means that we now habitually sort of, or historically, the way we are conditioned to think about our psyche, we define free will as the ability to decide from that 1%. And I mean, you just need to take a look at the New Year's resolutions of all the people who want to do more sports and read more and finally, I don't know, be a bit more outgoing and get to know new people and be more social and whatever, and see that most of them fail. And if we define our free will as that, as the ability to decide from the conscious mind, then we do not even have to argue about this. Then nobody has the free will here, right? So obviously that definition does not work. So the definition that works for me is to say, okay, I do have the free will, but who is I? I am obviously a whole ecosystem of aspects of which some are known to me and some, most, aren't. That makes the whole thing interesting, right? There's this quote, I don't remember from, you can tell me in the comments who the quote is from. It was something like, you can do what you want, but you cannot want what you want. Which kind of sums it up quite well, right? So that means we all have this vast bulk of the iceberg, and we do have a free will, but if we want to have that aligned with the things that we consciously want, we need to work with the iceberg, right? We cannot just ignore it because that thing has much more power than our little brains. So now it gets interesting, right? Because we're used to like think, okay, the only thing that keeps me from doing the things that I want to do is, I don't know, being kind of influenced by other people. Like so many people have these bumper stickers of like, live your dream and do whatever you want, and do not give a shit about what others think about you. But the biggest trap is actually not believing others, but believing yourself. And what I mean very specifically, like, I'm not joking about this. Like, the biggest trap in decision making is actually saying, I decide to, and then believing yourself. This is the biggest trap. Because when I say, I decide to, whatever, forgive my father for the stuff that he had done when I was young. Forgiveness, just as an example, is not a conscious action that I can take. It is a result of an inner process. So when I say, I decide to forgive somebody, what this needs to be translated to, like, if you want to like, if you understand how reality works, then this sentence in itself is bullshit, and you have to translate that into, okay, I decide to have the intention to do whatever it takes to, at some point that I cannot control, arrive in that state of forgiveness. This is not bullshit. This is actually possible. This is actually doable. So what that means is the tip of the iceberg decides, I want to experience forgiveness. And then the only thing that the tip of the iceberg has control of is consciously deciding to make space, to learn the tools, to get the support that you need in order to work with the bulk of the iceberg, in order to process whatever needs to be processed, in order to then, as a result of that work, arrive in the state of forgiveness. And this is just one example. This goes for like a lot of things. Like, if you say, I decide to do more sports and to lose weight, well, guess what? This is not going to happen. Why would it? Right? You have all these other parts of you that have decided that sports is a waste of time, that you look awful when you go running and others see you and you don't want to be seen that way, that it takes so much effort that is not worth it, that you are anyway not the sporty one of the family because your brother was much better. Like, there is all these other parts of me in the bulk of the iceberg that are decided already that this is not happening. So the moment when my conscious mind, the tip of the iceberg, decides, I want to lose weight, it's a little bit like, I don't know, like if at Google, that has like thousands of employees, one employee says, I am deciding today that Google should be focusing on creating books for children. It's like, yeah, it's not happening, right? It takes a lot more effort to actually decide that the whole thing goes into that direction. It's a bit like the cruise ship. Even when the skipper who has the steering wheel in his hands turns the wheel, it still takes time, right? So for all the decisions that matter, that are not just on that level of, I should call the dentist to make an appointment, where like all of the bulk of the iceberg is already decided that this is fine, so there is no resistance whatsoever, all the other decisions require that you actually take a look at the bulk of the iceberg. So let me tell you a little story. When I was growing up, I was part of a relatively poor family, and a family that had money spending habits and not so much money keeping or money earning habits. So my life basically looked like, if there was money, then we would use it for whatever, as long as it is there, because who knows how long it is there, right? So you can imagine that this shaped my own money habits into a life where my baseline is basically zero, and whenever anything comes in, I just spend it. So it was an issue for me to keep money, to say the least. So the moment when I decided, and I means the tip of the iceberg, decided that I want to be wealthy and I want to have money, I want to have a buffer of security. So what do you think happened? Well, nothing until I started to actually work on that decision. So again, with all these decisions, when you say I decide, you have to kind of translate that into I intend to decide. Because having like a background of a poor family with really, really bad money habits, I cannot just decide that this all is going to be different from today on. Like, this is not something that my mind can do. But what my mind can do is be like, okay, I'm going to educate myself. And what does that mean? That means that you basically go through these layers of subconscious programming. These are a bit like automated thoughts, so to say, in my psyche, that I do not know that they even exist. So you kind of have to figure out what is the decision that you can make with that tip of the iceberg that will get you closer to the rest of it. That is what it comes down to. When I teach intuitive decision making in my coaching programs and workshops, we always focus on that. So if your decision is you want to be wealthy, you want to change your money habits, what can you translate that into that has no resistance? Like buying and reading a book about money habits, for me, was my first step. That was something that I had no resistance to. So if my 1%, if my tip of the iceberg decides I want to read a book about money habits, the 99% of me, the bulk of the iceberg, does not have any stories about that. Yeah, go read a book, whatever. There is no resistance to that. So I did that. Did that solve my problems? No, of course not. There's much more to that. So I started to do process work. I started to do shadow work. I started to reflect on my money habits. I started to reflect my money history. Where do I come from? I started to analyze those subconscious beliefs, trying to figure out what are these things that I'm thinking about money. Like, I never thought about that before. I was not educated in school. My parents did not teach me. Nobody taught me about money, right? The university didn't care. Like, nobody cares whether you learn money habits or not. You have to do that yourself. So in the DIY manner, I went through all these layers, basically working like for years, literally, on my subconscious parts of me that were against that initial decision. So basically, if you want to look at it from the decision making point of view, the only thing I did in the end is take the decision to be a wealthy person. But that took me years, because the implications of all that was working with the subconscious patterns, with those thought patterns, with negative feelings associated to that. For example, at one point, I realized, I'm projecting security onto money. Like, I think that money is the only thing that gives me the sense of security. Well, turns out money does not have an agenda and it doesn't care about your security. So the only person who can take care of your feelings of safety, basically that's what it comes down to, is you. So to me, that was connected with a lot of grief, with a lot of realizing, wow, I came into this world where money is super important, but nobody showed me how to actually have it, how to actually keep it. So I was basically abandoned and left alone with these very basic needs, right? that was connected to a lot of grief. So processing that grief and then going to the next and the next and the next layer in order to, in the end, arrive at that, I call that the full body yes, which is when not only the tip of the iceberg takes the decision, I want to be wealthy, which amounts to nothing, but when the whole iceberg is actually aligned with that decision and be like, okay, I have the thoughts, the feelings, the visions, I have the strategies and tactics, I know how other people do that, I know what works, I know what doesn't, I know what are the consequences of that decision, because every decision that have positive consequences also has negative consequences. This is the duality that we live in. So all that, including all that, and have that full body yes, that decision moment where I feel like, okay, there is nothing else in me, like there is nothing else left unexamined that is against that decision. Am I there yet after like 8 years of work or so? No, not really. But I don't see that as a 0 or 1 state either. This is a grayscale and this is a process. Am I more wealthy than I was when I started? Oh yes, big time. Do I still have potential to go? Oh yes, totally. So this is why I call decision-making work alignment work, because deciding with the conscious mind is the easy part, but aligning all the subconscious parts, all these different domains, like the domain of habits, or the domain of self-worth, or your social domain, like all these different clouds or networks of automated thought, aligning all that with the conscious decision, like with the tip of the iceberg, that is the actual bulk of work. And that is what it takes to have these full body yes decisions. Why is this important? Well, because not only will the decisions backfire and not work if you do not do this work, but also even if you manage to, like, say I have this difficult decision to call my boss and talk about the uncomfortable thing. And let's say I do have these unaddressed issues in the bulk of my subconscious that oppose that decision. So I have resistance. I postpone that for weeks. Say I actually override all that. Say I force myself to do it. What do you think will happen? Like, we all know intuitively what will happen. It will in some way backfire. It will in some way not work. Why? Because there's unexamined stuff. And these parts of me, these aspects, want to be seen. And if they cannot be seen by that force of resistance, if I ignore that and bulldoze my way to taking that decision, sort of, they will get hurt in other ways. Like, I might get sick. I might get, like, people get cancers about stuff like that. I might have the conversation with my boss, but I might, like, turn out to be a total asshole in that conversation and not arrive to the resolution that I wanted. Like, all kinds of things can happen if we try to bulldoze ourselves. And this is what I mean by saying, do not just care too much about what others say, but also do not take your own, do not take your own thoughts that seriously, because every thought, everything that my conscious mind says is basically an intention setting. And whether I actually take the responsibility to align the rest of me is a completely other question. Like, let me give you a final example. This might be quite an uncomfortable one. When somebody tells you, I love you, even when you tell somebody, I love you, even that is not the actual decision. This is an intention. Like, when somebody tells me, I love you, I know that what this means is I intend to love you, and they might try big time, they might try a little bit. That depends on a whole other set of factors. But basically, even loving somebody is not something that the tip of the iceberg can decide to do. What it can decide, again, is to work on the inner resistance to loving people. And in the Western world, do we have lots of reasons to not love people, because loving is dangerous. Loving takes a lot of effort. It might take sacrifice. It might take compromise. It might mean that I need to finally learn to say no and keep my boundaries, because loving somebody without keeping your boundaries will get really, really uncomfortable. There's a lot of implications of loving somebody, and it's so easy to say, in a way, yeah, I do want to love you, but do I really? Am I capable? Like, do I kind of want to, but part of me is like, the last time you loved somebody, it was a complete disaster, remember? So there's all these, again, parts of me that actually oppose that decision. So if we can be honest with this, if we can live in integrity with what we say and what we do, then we do not just do the things necessary, but we also kind of meet ourselves with compassion and with humbleness, knowing that everything that I say I want, everything that I say I decide, are just intentions, and that's fine. Like, my life is full of good intentions, and whether those intentions will work out or not mainly depends on the amount of shadow work that I'm doing. What I mean by shadow work is the amount of work that I do looking into those uncomfortable places, going into the subconscious, meeting those aspects of me that oppose my intentions, and getting them on board, getting them integrated into my life, and arriving into that full body yes with whatever I intend to do. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that was helpful. This was Bold Perspectives podcast with Archie Del Rey, and see you next time.